So when I decided to come to Baltimore, I knew that one of the videos on my list was definitely going to be a video about Joe Metheny. In fact, this story of Joe Metheny, when you're hearing it and when you're reading it, it seems like it's like a movie, like it's made up. Now, this is the Hanover Street Bridge. Under here, back in the 90s, was a tent city. Homeless people, lots of homeless people. This was really the scene of some horrific murders. Joe Metheny wrote this, basically like a my story. I don't think it was an admittance of guilt because he was already in prison. He admitted to or told stories of killing many, many people. He claimed he killed like 13 people or something, but they couldn't prove that. So the way Metheny tells the story is that he came from a rough childhood, a neglected childhood. But his mother would say different. She said that they were always cared for, at least they had everything they needed. But he claims that he came from a very abusive family. And continuing on from there, he had a hard life, addicted to drugs. He was a forklift operator at a pallet company, which I'm going to take you to. And he came home from work, and his wife had left him. She cleaned out the whole house. She left him. She was a crack addict or a drug addict. I guess he didn't care much about her, but she took his son, and that's what he was mad about. She shacked up with some other guy and ended up getting arrested and going to prison or detox or something. And the kid went into social services, and then this guy Joe could not get his kid back. Apparently all of this started him on his killing spree. He came down to this bridge, the Hanover Street Bridge, which at the time, back in the 90s, was a tent city. It all started back in July of 1994. I was at work. I was a truck driver. I was working overtime this one night. Then I got off and went home, as I always did. But when I opened the door and turned on the light, I noticed that there was nothing there. My old lady had taken everything, including my son, and left me. Her leaving was not my problem, but she took my 6-year-old son with her. She was a crack addict and a worthless piece of S. I would have paid her to get out of my life. All she had to do was take my son over to my mother's house, and she could have had everything else and be gone. I found out about 6 months later she had moved on to the other side of town with some a-hole. They got busted for drugs, and they took my son away from them for child neglect and child abuse. I had no chance of going to social services and trying to get my son back due to my past criminal record. So I took it upon myself, with the hatred I had for these two who lost my son, to go looking for them. I had found out from someone they was going under that bridge and getting high with some homeless MFers. I went under there looking for them. They were not there, but 2 homeless MFers they got high with were down there. They were passed out on some old stinky mattress, and that's where they were when I left, except they were dead from being chopped up. That same night I had lured the first crack whore down under the bridge. I got her high, and I was trying to get information out of her about my old lady's whereabouts. She acted like she didn't know, so I beat the hell out of her, raped her, and killed her. I put her in some bushes and went and lured the second one down there. I did the same to her as the last one, but as I was about to throw her in the bushes, I noticed an old black man down by the river fishing and looking back up at me. I grabbed the steel pipe, ran down on him, and laid his head wide open. So I put the 2 girls and him in the river and weighed them down with rocks. That was a very busy night for me. 5 murders within about 7 hours. I washed up in the river and cleaned up the crime scene as much as I could, then left. That's random. 2.5 weeks later, I was arrested and charged with the murders of the 2 men I chopped up. I spent close to 18 months in Baltimore City Jail waiting to go to trial. The trial lasted 1 week, and it was thrown out of court because of lack of evidence. I was free again. I went back and talked to my old boss into giving my job back to me at the pallet company. There was a little trailer on the property, so I told my boss to let me stay there and I would keep an eye on the place. He agreed to this and gave me the keys to the front gate and the main building. The company was on a dead-end road and was very isolated. It was perfect for what I wanted to do. I lured 2 more crack whores up there to my trailer. I killed and butchered their bodies. I cut their meat up and put it in some Tupperware bowls, then put it in the freezer. I buried the remains in several shallow graves in a little woods behind the company. Over the next couple of weeks on the weekends, I opened up a little open pit beef stand. I had real roast beef and pork sandwiches, and why not? They were very good. The human body tastes very similar to pork. If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference. Everything was going pretty good until I ran out of my special meat, so I lured another one up to my trailer. I got her in there and started to rip her clothes off and knocking the hell out of her. She was screaming, but there was no one around to hear except for me, and I just kept on laughing at her. I turned around for a split second, and that was my mistake, and she ran out of the door before I could get to her. There was an 8-foot chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it around the front of the company. There was a stack of wooden pallets next to the fence about 10 feet high. That bee scaled those pallets like a monkey and jumped the fence and ran down to the main road where some guy in a pickup truck took her to a nearby gas station where she called the cops. Well, I knew the cops were on the way, but I didn't run. I gathered up her clothing, grabbed the keys to the gate, and went out and opened it. As soon as I stepped out of the gate, cop pulled up, jumped out, and pulled his gun on me and told me to get on the ground, and that is where it came to an end. They took me down and booked me. She had told them that I said I was going to kill her like the rest, which was true. They had me sitting in a little room down by homicide, drilling me, trying to find out what I had done. I had them going crazy over the company, digging up the remains of those 2 bees there, because I had the remains buried in 7 different holes.
A convicted Baltimore serial killer has died this weekend. Joe Metheny, the bald man in the video, was found dead in his cell. In this WJZ file video, Joe Metheny shows police where he buried the bodies. The 62-year-old was serving 2 life sentences without parole for kidnapping, sexual assault, and 2 counts of murder.
The only thing I feel bad about in any of this is I didn't get to murder the 2 MFers I was really after, and that's my ex-old lady and the guy she hooked up with. Well, that's my story, horrible but true. So the next time you're riding down a road and you happen to see an open pit beef stand that you've never seen before, make sure you think about this story before you take a bite of that sandwich. Sometimes you never know who you may be eating. Joe Roy Metheny. A lot of those victims, if it's true, if it's real, there were no names to them. So it's hard to look up information as far as that goes, but it's crazy to think, and I wish I could find out if it's true that he really did serve them meat from those bodies. I would love to see the location of where that took place, but I wasn't able to find any information at all. Anyway, that's the story of Joe Metheny. Crazy story, the cannibal, and unfortunately he made a lot of other people cannibals. All right, I'm getting back on the road. See you in the next video.